Well, as the curtain is coming down on Busisiwe Mkhwebane's tenure as Public Protector, Parliament has announced a short list of candidates to replace her. The suspended Public Protector's term is coming to an end in October. Now, Parliament's ad-hoc committee that's been tasked with finding the new Public Protector has released the names of 8 shortlisted candidates. In fact, from tomorrow, the 1st of August, the ad-hoc committee will start screening all 8 candidates, a process which will then be followed by a series of interviews before hopefully concluding this process by the end of August. But how stringent is this process, considering the fact that the Public Protector's Office has been under scrutiny in recent months and it is a pivotal Chapter 9 institution in the Republic? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now by the head of Stakeholder Relations and Campaigns at Corruption Watch, Kavisha Pillay. Good afternoon, Ms. Pillay. Welcome to today, and thank you very much for your time. You, as Corruption Watch, has issued a statement where you have a study. You've done a study about these 8 candidates, and you've expressed some concerns. Are they major concerns?
Not necessarily. Thanks, Dan, for having us on. The ad hoc committee had released the names of the 38 candidates who were being considered for a shortlist. And what we had done was a basic screening and vetting exercise to understand whether the candidates met the most basic criteria for appointment. So Section 1A of the Public Protector Act sets out some criteria that you should have 10 years of experience, be admitted as an advocate, etc. And we looked at the candidates' CVs and assessed whether or not these candidates met that basic criteria, but also we looked at whether or not they had any directorships or company interests.
Okay.
From what we can see of the the list of shortlisted candidates.
Yes.
Sorry. So what we can see from the list of shortlisted candidates is that most of them meet the basic criteria. There's only one candidate which could be an issue in terms of an omission in the CV that resulted in us coming to the conclusion that that candidate doesn't meet the basic criteria. We've also outlined the directorships, and what we're wanting the committee to do is to probe business interests of the candidates to make sure that there wouldn't be any conflicts if a specific candidate then assumes the position of the public protector.
Okay, which candidate is that?
Who hasn't met the criteria.
Yes, the one that you want to make sure that the ad hoc committee really does proper screening. They are starting to be screened from tomorrow for 2 weeks, I think up to the 18th of this month, of next month.
So all of the vast majority of candidates do have active directorships. So they're either on boards of organizations or they're directors of companies. And what the committee needs to do is they need to understand what are the financial interests and then ask the candidates if they'd be willing to let go of their directorships, which I think would be really important in terms of mitigating conflicts of interest should they be appointed. The one candidate from our assessment who doesn't meet the basic criteria is Professor Msiyane. And that could just be an omission in his CV. We're unsure if this candidate is actually admitted as an attorney or an advocate in order to be considered for this position.
So being an advocate or having been an advocate is one of the key criteria that you would need to be nominated for this job and do this role. Other parts of the Public Protectors Act that raise red flags if you are a director of a commercial entity?
No, so the Public Protectors Act is silent on that, and I think there's many, parts of our legislation in the country or regulations that don't make any pronouncements that you can't be a director or own a company. But I think, based on our history, based on all of the evidence in the public domain of people using their private companies to get access to state contracts, we think that this is really important, that to mitigate conflicts of interest, there's nobody's holding an active directorship where they're then also able to draw in income if that company is also doing work with the state.
Okay. Last week I interviewed former Constitutional Court Judge Johan Kriegler just for his views as freedom under law. I mean, and I asked him, and I'm going to ask you the same question now. Does this process that has been outlined, the shortlisting to 8 candidates, which is much less than what happened 7 years ago, it was a longer list, and they used to interview them into the dead of the night, which was a long process. But this time they got 8 candidates, and they want to finish the process before the end of August. But does this process advantage in any shape or form the deputy, the acting public protector? She was deputy before she became acting, Advocate Galega, and I know that, was it Kevin Malunga? He was a deputy before to Thuli Madonsela. He didn't get the job, although he was deputy. I know that it's not automatic, but does the process give her some sort of an advantage?
I don't necessarily think so. There was also a previous deputy public protector, Mamiki Shai, who applied for in the 2016 process. So I don't think being a deputy automatically gives you an advantage. It may give you an advantage in terms of your understanding of the organization's operations. And in that respect, where the MPs are asking questions about the functionality, how to lead an organization, these candidates and the current deputy would have, a greater advantage having worked in this organization. But what I think needs to happen, and what has been happening, is that there is a process and this process has been fairly transparent up until this point. There's been opportunities for public participation. The screening process prior to the interviews, I think, is a really good move. Previously, what happened was they only screened candidates post the interview process. So where they're checking for the qualifications, they're verifying references, as well as looking at doing financial and security vetting. That then becomes important information in the context of the interview process to probe candidates on. So at this point, I don't think that the Deputy Public Protector is being given, any particular advantages. Where there may be an issue is that if the interviews happen over 2 days, and the problems that we sometimes face is that you want to call for standardized questioning so that candidates are, there's not one candidate posed with all of these political questions and then another candidate that's you're only asking them about how to run the organization. And that's what happened in 2016. And when you have interviews over 2 days, what you may find is that candidates would have picked up some of the questions and prepared based on the day before for the interviews happening on the second day. But I think so far there's no indication that this process is going to, benefit the Deputy Public Protector in any way.
Yeah, and the process has to be, as you said, consistent in terms of the questions. So all of them must be given the opportunity to respond to the same set of questions, and the transparency would be important. Now, would you mind us going through the shortlist just quickly, one by one? You did some desk work, you did some preliminary assessment. I guess Corruption Watch will be one of those NGOs who will have a very vested interest in this. I mean, this Chapter 9 institution is very critical to our democracy, to service delivery and protecting the basic rights of citizens. We've just spoken about Advocate Galega, the acting public protector. Anything that in your mind could be a controversial one around her possible ascendance or occupation of the office?
So with the current Deputy Public Protector, when she was being appointed during the process to appoint the Deputy Public Protector, we also participated in that. And we did raise some red flags about some of her past professional conduct. And that included her role as the legal advisor to Malusi Gigaba when he was the Minister of Home Affairs and during the whole Fireblade saga. And there was also her role in the Richard Ndluli matter, where there was an allegation against her that she tried to bribe a witness. So we had raised those concerns in 2019 about fitness and integrity. And the committee at the time thought that, well, these allegations weren't proved, so they were satisfied to go ahead with this appointment. I think prior to the appointment, the big issue that's going to be, in everybody's mind is how she viewed the Phala Phala matter, and whether or not that and her sort of biases and motivation for the final ruling. And I think that's going to be, she's going to face a lot of scrutiny from the ad hoc committee on, her decision-making process in that regard. But I think even with that, everybody should be given a fair process, regardless of whether you agreed with the report or didn't agree with the report. There should be a fair process to assess whether the merits of the candidate.
Okay, I want to move the focus away from where we've covered here enough. Any of the other candidates besides the professor that you mentioned earlier? I'm trying to get his name. Is it Masanyane? The one who you were concerned about, Musinyane, Professor Buitumelo Musinyane, you were concerned about not being an advocate, you're not sure. What about the other candidates, the likes of Advocate Tsiriso Tipanyano, who used to run the Human Rights Commission?
Yes, so Advocate Tipanyane has a long history of working in Chapter 9 bodies, and I think that may be to his advantage. And based on his CV, he has a very impressive career. He's also been recently appointed to the board of the SABC, and through another organization that he's associated with, has been leading on whistleblower reform and ensuring that the whistleblower environment and legislative environment protects and supports whistleblowers. So I think he has good qualifications. There's another candidate, Advocate Mavungo Lukaimani, who is the current pension funds adjudicator. She was also she was also in the front line in the 2016 process, and was pretty impressive, I would say, in terms of her CV, in terms of the work that she's done. So I think based on how the committee has voted in terms of their favorites, Advocate Tipanyane and Advocate Lukaimani appear as favorites at the moment.
Okay, what about the other two? Very quickly, we're going to be out of time. The Advocate Oliver Josie, and we also have Advocate Lynn Murray. Very briefly, Kavisha?
So both of them have experience in the administration of justice and have worked in different law enforcement institutions. I think Advocate Josie was also at some point the head of the Scorpions, if I'm not mistaken. So he does come from a background of law enforcement, of investigations. And Advocate Murray as well has an extensive legal background. So all of these candidates are impressive based on their qualifications, based on their experience in their CVs, and what the committee is going to have to do is conduct a proper screening exercise to ensure that the people that are going through into the interview process or in the interview process, it's going to result and it's going to produce a public protector that is fit and proper, and it's not one that's not biased, one that's not going to act without fear, favor, or prejudice, and somebody who is going to protect the public interest.
Thank you very much for your time and insights. Kavisha Pillay, she's of course the head of Stakeholder Relations and Campaigns at Corruption Watch, just giving us some of their initial sort of digging around about these 8 candidates who've been shortlisted by Parliament, and the ad hoc committee tasked with appointing the new public protector, who should be in place to take over from November after the end of the term of office of the suspended public protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane, who that's going to be. They've been assessing. From tomorrow, they'll be screening them over the next 2 weeks until the 18th of August. And I understand after the process of screening, there'll be then the process of interviews. The Parliamentary ad hoc committee on this matter is targeting the 31st of August to conclude its process and hand over its report to the National Assembly.